So thank you, Kevin, for asking me to facilitate this discussion with yourself and Mark today. The purpose of the discussion is to discuss the Hardmoors 60, which you both competed last week. And just for those who don't know what the Hardmoors 60, it's 62 miles, covering the second half of the Hardmoors 110 route. Takes in the Cleveland coastline through Saltburn, Brunswick Bay, Scarborough, and finally finishing in Filey. So to say it's as challenging as it is beautiful would be probably accurate. So today we're going to talk to both of you about, first of all, how coming back into it as competitors that have done this before, how have you found it being with the current restrictions? How was that different? How did Jon and Shirley do it so they could actually put it on, seeing as though so many races have been cancelled?
Do you want to start, Mark, or should I?
Yeah, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so I think in some ways Jon and Shirley have almost pioneered some of the adjustments to certainly ultra races to have them on in COVID times, because they had the Hardmoors 110 on a month ago, as well as the Hardmoors 60. So some of the obvious things are like staggered starts. So we were setting off in groups of 6 at 2-minute intervals. So I set off at 8:10. I think, Mark, you were 8:15. Is that right?
Yeah, 8:14. Yeah.
8:14. Yeah. So yeah, it's all sort of, like I say, staggered starts, so that you're never in groups that are too big. One of the bits about that was interesting to sort of go through in practice was registration, and that side of things is then completely different as well. So you've been asked to turn up at the start line only 20 minutes before your start, no earlier. And then they had a holding area where everybody could be socially distant, and then you were called forward in your groups to get your trackers put onto your pack, and then your group moves around to get ready to start, basically. And it was very well organised. So yeah, I think that stopped the mass congregation at the start. Setting off
from a dot watcher's point of view, it was quite frustrating because you couldn't work out who was first, who was second, who was third. But obviously that's part and parcel of the new.
Yeah, and it was a bit like that in the race, which I almost prefer, because I prefer not to know where I am, and even, I try to stop myself looking at any kind of positions or anything until the back end of the race.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, it was quite nice because I couldn't look at positions.
Yeah.
Because somebody that had started an hour behind me could have caught up 40 minutes. I would still never see them.
So how did you feel about that, Mark? Because obviously you placed quite highly as well. Were you looking at the positions or?
No, well, that was it. I had no idea for the race where I was until very near the end. I asked one of the checkpoints, how many people had gone through, and they said about a dozen, a few relays, and I was quite surprised because you had no idea during the day. I was sort of steadily passing people all day. Not many were passing me, but it was kind of, I went out to run my own race, which was good in a way. It helped, not that pressure of mass start, and just being able to do what you want and enjoy it. So it was quite good.
Yeah.
So what were the differences in how you both prepared? Because obviously I know Kev was helping Sabrina Vergy the week before, really focused on the race that he had in his head. Doing about 5 ultras in probably 2 weeks, essentially.
I did 3 ultras in 8 days.
Lunatic. So Mark, what was different? Because obviously you knocked 3 hours off your time this time round. So what was different in the preparation?
Yeah, well, I think last year I'd done the Triple Crown in Scotland, so the Highland Fling, West Highland Way, and Devil of the Highlands last year. And I think the Devil was about a month before the Harmoors. So I think I was probably a bit tired from that going into it last year.
Yeah.
And had no idea what to expect. Just came up, turned up. Thought it'd be nice to run along the coast. Didn't realise there was so many steps and it would be so hot. It was a bit of a nightmare race last year. But the difference this year was I took on a coach at the start of the year, Casey Morgan. So I've been doing a lot of strength and conditioning, a lot of hill reps, sort of structured training for the first time. So training's gone quite well, good consistent training. And then about a week before the race, I picked up a bad cold that was going around the office. So that wasn't ideal, but luckily it didn't come too much and I was fine on race day. So decent prep really for the race.
So how, like, going back to the COVID restrictions, was that a bit of a worry? Did you have to go get a test for that before you sort of subjected yourself?
No, we didn't have to get a test.
Yeah,
you had to sign a declaration to say obviously you were healthy to start, and when you arrived you got your temperature taken. So I guess it was a bit of a worry. It was all new, but it felt very safe and very well organised, and it was just, it seemed very slick at the start.
Okay.
And it worked much better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest risk with it all was when we went through, in the race, you run through Whitby and Scarborough, and those two seaside towns looked like there was no pandemic going on.
Yeah.
They were crowded with people. I'd say about half the people were wearing masks in crowded streets. Obviously, masks are not mandatory in a crowded street, but perhaps advisable when when you're shoulder to shoulder with other people. And to be honest, that was the only time in the whole day that I felt any kind of risk from COVID.
It is kind of out of the race organisers' control, isn't it? That, I mean,
absolutely.
we sort of give disclaimers for that, but it's weather dependent, day dependent.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, there's nothing race directors can do about that. That is just the behaviour of the British public.
Great British public.
I was just surprised.
Sorry, let's go out.
How busy it was. It was,
yeah.
Because for me, it was exactly as busy as those towns were 2 years ago when there was no pandemic going on.
Yeah.
When I went through there, and that was a bit of a surprise. I think the only other thing about the staggered starts was at the finish, when somebody finished, obviously, even then you didn't know exact placings, which is, I think, probably fine for Mark and I. But I know when Kim finished as third female, Shirley couldn't give her the trophy because she didn't know is somebody else going to finish that started later and made up lots of time. So I think actually the biggest issue with that, as I understand from Shirley, is that John's a Yorkshireman and he didn't want to pay the postage on sending the trophy out. He was really upset that he couldn't hand it out on the
day. Brilliant. Yeah, well, I feel for him.
But yeah, like I say, it's just then it is slightly odd when somebody finishes and you know, obviously we did congratulate her on as we realised, barring somebody running a spectacular race from further back on the start, that she was third female, and so you congratulate, but it was just a slightly muted celebration because you're just waiting to see.
Yeah, and it's tough, that, isn't it? It's well, it's just the way things are going. But going actually into the race itself, because obviously preparation's been different this year because a lot of races have been cancelled, so everything's out of the calendar that you potentially would have been doing that might have put time on legs, prepared you in a better way. Or actually, do you feel as though that time that you would have been racing has better prepared you in terms of how fit you are, because you're not worried about races, you're not worried about fitting into a calendar, how do you feel as though that's actually transferred into a race situation? Has it made it better for you? Did you find you had more energy to do completing the race, more mental focus on the race itself?
Let you go first, Mark.
All right, yep. I think it's a bit of a different experience. I think, obviously I was due to do the Fling this year, I was due to do the West Highland Way, I was due to do the CCC, and each one of those got cancelled. The Hardmoors 60 wasn't on the plan originally. Probably said last year I'll never do it again, but...
Was the only one on?
But it looked like this was possibly going to happen, and as soon as the CCC was cancelled, I signed up for this.
Was that the Chamonix?
Yes, the one in Chamonix. Yeah, so I signed up for the 60 and sort of got quite focused. Wanted to do well on that, so that was good to be able to prepare just for that. And I'd kept my fitness ticking over, so obviously I had enough fitness for that, which was good.
And did you enjoy it better this time round, having said you'd never do it again?
Yeah, no, definitely enjoyed it this year. So that was, which it helps, I think, if you're enjoying it.
Yeah, well, it does.
Apart from maybe just from Scarborough to Filey, Filey never got any closer.
What's the distance between those two?
I think from leaving the checkpoint, it's less than 10 miles. It's only about 8 miles, but it seems a hell of a long way.
Well, it does when you've got another 50 miles in your belt.
Yeah. But no, I was able to enjoy the stunning scenery and stuff. Chatting to people like Kevin on the race. So it was good.
Because what was the weather like? Was it a little bit windy?
It was windy, yeah. We were running into the wind a good bit of the day. It was very hot during the middle of the day. Probably not as hot as last year. I felt it was hot all day last year. But it still got quite warm. But luckily it cooled down later on to finish.
Yeah, no, that's good. And what about yourself, Kev?
Yeah, so just going back to the preparation, the general picture is very similar to Mark in that during lockdown and everything else, I just settled into very, very consistent training. With all the races and everything getting cancelled, and even to the level that I would normally train to was difficult to achieve during lockdown anyway. When I could only go out once a day, I couldn't hit the kind of mileage that I wanted to do at that time. So I've just kept my sort of fitness steady and level. But what I've found is that the kind of niggles that build up when you're pushing yourself hard and training haven't really built up. I've been able to fully rest and recover. And so my base fitness is at the highest level it's ever been by a long way. Though I would say that I haven't got sort of race level fitness at the moment. I'm certainly not at a peak, but my base fitness is such that as we joked about earlier, I technically completed 3 ultras in 8 days, 2 30-milers with a fairly heavy pack supporting Sabrina on the Saturday and then the Monday, and then ran this race on the following Saturday, and put in a decent time. Took 40 minutes off, nearly 50 minutes off my time from 2 years previous, and it just turned into an interesting experience of managing my body. I've never started a race with tired legs, not this tired.
I thought they were rejuvenated.
Well, I went to Vive Sports Therapy partway through the week and got a massage, and that really helped. So they felt like new. To be honest, my legs felt really, really good at the start, but it was about 15 miles in, they suddenly felt like they had 40 or 50 miles on them.
So talk me through the race from both your point of views. I mean, did you, what were the elements? Did you struggle with anything? Was anything different from how you thought it was going to be on the day? Talk me through like the day itself.
Go on, Mark.
Yes, obviously the plan was to go out very conservatively, try and take it easy. Obviously knew what happened last year. I think it was on the back of my mind, and I wasn't wanting to go off too quick. I wanted to make sure I was okay later on. So I was just kind of going out steady, enjoying it. As I say, it did get a little bit hot in the middle of the day, and obviously I was sort of power walking up all the steps initially, and then sort of slowed down on maybe the steps as it went on, because as it started to get hotter, that was more difficult. So I was worried about, last year I got cramp in my quads, and I was kind of worried that might happen again. But every time I kind of felt that, I just took some salt or plenty of water. But I was eating well, which was good. I don't think I really had any low points in the race as such. I mean, I had sometimes you starting to feel a bit more tired, a bit more dehydrated, but still had plenty of food and drinks, so it went
So
okay.
sorry, Mark, can I
Yeah,
just
no, sure.
touch on that, because a lot of the runners that I tend to speak to or run who are just sort of moving up from the very low level ultra to possibly 50 plus. How as both of you, just to touch away from the actual day itself, both of you nutrition wise, how has it taken a long time for you to sort of work out what your body needs at those places, and what are you taking on board at those points? When do you recognize it? At what time in the race are you eating, drinking, and what are you eating and drinking?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of learning. I've been doing ultras for 2 years now, so just trial and error. I'm quite lucky in that I can generally take most things. I don't have stomach issues or sickness. I mixed up. I had Tailwind, I had gels. The real food I had in the drop bags was like quiche, crisps. I took plenty of Coke, the checkpoints. So that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
Yeah, plenty of water. Yeah.
And what about yourself, Kev? Because you sort of played around with nutrition. Having known you for quite a long time, you've played around with nutrition quite a lot over the past couple of years, haven't you? So
Yeah, because I kind of had to come at it differently from the point of view, and actually my Hardmoors 62 years ago is a perfect example of why I had to try and tackle things differently. So 2 years ago in the Hardmoors 60, I was using Tailwind, and then had a few sort of bits of real food to sort of back that up. And I got sort of halfway through the race and started feeling sick, and I couldn't eat anything. And I basically didn't eat anything from about halfway in the race 2 years ago, which makes for a very painful finish. I was sick after I finished, and it's really not a good state to be in. And that's what I've been trying to move away from. And so I've been on a bit of a journey with nutrition, which I probably understand more now. I wouldn't say I've completed the journey, but it's taken me to an interesting place now. So I spent a good part of the last 2 years doing a lot of my training, low carb, becoming fat adapted, doing a lot of fasted runs, using time restricted eating, and that's all been about getting my body to be able to burn fat rather than carbs, because I was having big issues getting the carbs in. Now, in Mark's case, no issues getting the carbs in, no need to change. It's great. So it's about finding what works. But then what I've found now is, having got myself fat adapted, essentially what I believe I've done is that I've made my body work properly again. I've undone years of modern living where my body had become addicted to processed sugar, and I would definitely say that I was pre-diabetic at the start of this journey, and I'd say I've undone that now, and my insulin reaction and everything else is how it should be. It's kind of like a normal person again, after sort of 2-3 years of sort of training through this kind of stuff. And so now in the race, my strategy in a way was very similar to Mark's, because I've got my body back to working normal. In the race, it was all carbs basically. I had some sandwiches in my drop bags, which is very equivalent to the quiche. I had a brainwave the night before, which was brilliant, and I'll definitely do again. And the drop bags and the Hardmoors 60 are just like small plastic bags. And we had an empty pizza box, like a pizza that goes in the oven sort of box. And I thought, if I cut the corner of the pizza box and put my sandwich inside of that, it'll actually protect it a bit in the plastic bag. And that worked really well. So when I got my drop bag, my sandwiches were not smashed. They were like perfect. They're like not damaged at all. Just a little bit of, but it was a small enough piece of box that I was running along with it in my hand for a while till I found a bin to throw it away. And you're not carrying a plastic box or something.
Mark, are you taking notes on this?
Yeah, but, see, that worked really
It
well.
works with the quiche as well.
Well, mine seemed to survive. I used tinfoil. That seemed to.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was. So I had those sandwiches. Then I use a mix of different bars. I just kind of don't like gels. Nothing kind of against them, and they'll probably work really well. But I tend to use the Voom bars rather than gels. They just, I think they react in my body the same as a gel does, but they taste a lot better and just enjoy them more. So
yeah, I mean, I must admit, like Voom and Velofort really seem to work for me. I've never mixed well with gels myself. They don't have a great reaction. I tend to feel nauseous with them for some reason, but other people are great on them.
Yeah, but I think it's just doing that job that you need something it's a well put together processed sugar that you can very quickly get the energy into your body. Yeah. And then the other thing that I've learned that I was making a mistake with in the past was like when I was first trying to do ultras, and you try and take on board so much information. I was thinking, okay, you need carbs in the race, and I would go for things like muesli bars, and thinking that the complex carbs are going to be better. The issue that I've learned the hard way, never understood it actually until recently, is the problem with those is they sit in my stomach, and the stomach doesn't empty into the intestines, so you don't actually get any energy out of them, and they're just juggling around in your stomach to the point where you feel sick. Whereas that's the idea of the processed stuff, which is not the healthiest stuff for, like, your health away from the race, but in the race it's going to give you the best performance. And it's the stuff that it basically just goes through your stomach very quickly, and you get the energy from it. But yeah, I'm still running on Sabrina's recommendation of avocado and cheese and tomato sandwiches.
Wasn't that an adaptation from Paul?
Well, it came out.
Paul Tierney, who did the smashed avocado on the Wainwrights or something. She picked that off him and then just adapted it.
But it was a joke with him, because he was eating like chips and stuff when he was doing his Wainwrights and set the record. And so when they made the film about it, all of his paces were joking on about him being a real diva and demanding smashed avocado that was smashed in just the right way. And so somebody was joking with Sabrina about it on her Wainwrights, and then she said, "Oh well, actually, it sounds like a really good idea to be serious about it." And so that's where her avocado and cheese and tomato sandwich idea came from. But it really works. It tastes really good.
It's what happened when middle class people go into ultra running, isn't it?
Yeah, but it is good. So I'm just using that at the moment. But yeah.
So if we go back to the race day itself, Mark, you obviously knocked just over 3 hours off your previous time. Were you quite aware going into this that you were going to knock such an amount of time off it? Because obviously you said you were training for like the CCC, which is obviously a tough race itself. Did you feel fit enough to knock so much time off? Were you aware of that when you were running, or was it a target?
Yeah, so to give you predicted times, and I predicted 12 and a half hours. Mm-hmm. I think I would have liked to be nearer 12, but I wasn't wanting to be too ambitious, maybe start off in a higher group and get pushed to go too quick at the start. But I knew I was a lot fitter, definitely a lot fitter. I knew I was going to knock hopefully a couple of hours off, but I was kind of aiming for, I'd be pleased with maybe 12 and a half or less and maybe a top 20. Mm-hmm. But to finish in the top 10 was just, yeah.
Yeah, because it was 11:30 to 19, wasn't it?
So I probably did better than I was expecting to do, but it's hard to know where you are when you've had no races all year.
Yeah.
I knew I was a lot fitter, training, doing a lot more consistent training, a lot more running. But yeah, it's hard to know where you are until you do a race. It's good to do the same one a year later to compare.
So going through the checkpoints, because obviously the checkpoints need quite a bit of timing, especially if you're clock watching and not just using it of a sort of, how long were you guys spending in checkpoints? And were you mindful that that was adding to your overall time?
Yeah, so I think the first few checkpoints that were just water and things, I went straight through because I had plenty of stuff with me till around the 20-mile first drop bag. And I think I was with Kev just before that. And then I think Kev went straight through. I took a bit of time faffing at that one, I think, filling up bottles and whatnot. But I think after that, I got a bit quicker. Apart from the main drop bag ones, I was pretty much straight through. But sometimes in races, it's quite good. I like just to spend, a few minutes to sort yourself out and get a break, because I normally catch up with the people that have gone straight through anyway. But I was probably a lot quicker through checkpoints this year.
What about yourself, Kev?
Yeah, so I mean, having seen people like Sabrina, I think this is one of the great things about getting the chance to support elite runners that are doing big things, because you get to see, how things are done at the sharp end. And so the only time I was stopped in checkpoints was filling my water bottles, because that was just necessary. There's no way I could see to avoid that. And then what I was doing with the drop bags was walking out of the checkpoint with it in my hand, and just faffing at a fast walk rather than standing still. And that worked really well. I think to the extent that the only time I took my pack off in the whole race was when I knew I had to get my head torch out, and I had to get my charger out for my watch, which was obviously late on in the race. But having done the race before, I knew that not far after the checkpoint, which is the last checkpoint again, Mark, Scarborough.
Scarborough,
yeah. Just not long after you come out the Scarborough checkpoint, you run through some fields and then you go up a hill at the side of some houses. But it's really good underfoot, but it's a steep enough hill that you're going to walk it, but it's not at all technical. So for me, that's a perfect chance. Take your pack off your back, hang it on one arm, and faff while you're walking up the hill, because I'm going to walk up that hill anyway. By the time I get to the top of the hill, my watch was on charge, head torch is on. If I had needed to move any food out of the back of the pack into the front, that would be done as well. And yeah, that's what I've been trying to do. And then my aim is to sort of move faster and faster straight away, because at the moment I'm coming out of the checkpoint and I'm probably walking a bit longer than I really need to while I'm eating and faffing and whatever else, and it's just trying to speed that up over time. But yeah, I think it's a good start to have the only time you're stationary while you're filling bottles.
So what were you two talking about when you were on ultras? You've got so much time to kill, you end up talking about all sorts. So what was occupying your conversations when you were running with each other? Probably races, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I think
it may not be aired.
No, I ran with Mark longer than I ran with anybody else in the race, but even then, I don't think it was much more than an hour at the most, 2 hours, Mark, that we ran together for.
Yeah, probably.
So I think in that time, you only really get through your main sort of history. I think you usually start off saying, "Have you done this before? What other races have you done?" I don't think we've got much further than that, unless you remember something different, Mark.
No, not really. That was it. Yeah, just shared experiences of races, and interested to hear about your recent supporting various people in FKTs. Yeah.
So going forward, have you got any experiences from this race that you can carry into something else, or is how this race is being run in the current pandemic the way you're seeing sort of future races in the next year or so taking place? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's the way forward for running them, being allowed to run them safely. I wasn't sure if I'd like it to begin with, but I was quite happy with how it was all run. I think it lends itself quite well. I don't think you'll see big city races for a long time, but I think these sort of trail races that spread out quite a bit are fine to do, even on this one where you see a couple of busy towns we went through, but most of these races are usually out in the countryside. So, but yeah, I think there was a great atmosphere on the race day. I think everybody, just felt good to be racing again. Didn't know if this might be the last one for a while, and just felt privileged to be there and doing it. I think just a good atmosphere.
Because is the Cheviot still on at the moment? Has that not been cancelled yet? Has it?
It's still on at the moment, and I have seen reference on their posts to them saying they've been talking to Jon and Shirley and learning from what they've been doing. So I know there have been other races on, but I think.
Sorry, have you got any interest in entering that, either of you, or just to get another race under your belt this year?
Yeah, it's funny. I've got no plans. I've got no other races booked for this year. Next year, I've got the West Highland Way deferred and the CCC deferred. The Fling, they've cancelled already for April next year. It's such a big event, I think. But I'll need to start having a look and see. I don't know whether I'll sign up for anything yet.
Yeah. Well, it's a big commitment as well with the CCC, because it's travel and all the medical documentation you've got to bring over with you, even for this. is interesting. So, would either of you have any other thoughts on the discussion we're having now?
I think that it's really difficult for the race directors at the moment. I mean, the race I'm really looking at is the Spine in January, which I'm on the waiting list for. And I think just a few weeks ago, I'd heard that they had things worked out and it was going to be able to comply with restrictions, and it was looking very likely to go ahead. And then the latest round of government restrictions have come in since then. And I don't know where that leaves that race. And I think it's incredibly difficult for the people running the races. The rules are changing. You can put all the work in and think you've got everything lined up, which also happened with UTS last weekend, where I know that there'd been a huge amount of work done to try and have that race on, and unfortunately it had to be cancelled at the last minute. And yeah, it's difficult, because obviously lots of people want to race. They're very passionate about it. In general, I think people are handling it very well. There's obviously some people are getting upset about races being cancelled or whatever, but in general, people just seem to be accepting it and looking at other things that can go on that are maybe not races. But yeah, I think we all wanted to return to some level of normality, of being able to know that if you've got a race booked in 3 or 4 months' time, that it is going to go ahead, so you can really train and focus for it. But it's nobody's fault at the end of the day. It's just a fact of life in 2020.
And as runners, how do you feel as though we could support or be better supportive of this? Because obviously coming out of this, we do want these events to go forward, like go ahead in the future. And at the moment, there's the element of unknown, isn't there? Because how long can these? Because there's a cost to putting those races together and then having to cancel at the last minute. So it can only go on for so long before these. And we've already seen some of these companies go into administration. Is there anything as runners we can be doing or looking to do, do you feel, that might better support these race directors?
I think there's been a lot of virtual races this year, which I guess has helped. I didn't think I would like it, but I did the West Highland Way virtual race this year. I enjoyed that. It was a good atmosphere on Facebook with the various people sharing.
Was that GB Ultras that did that one?
No, so that was the West Highland Way race.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah. And that was running the distance over, I think, roughly a week. so locally. So that was during lockdown. So it gave you kind of more. I did it to sign up, more incentive to do a few extra miles and get out the door.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mark, which I hadn't thought about until you mentioned it. I also did the Lakeland 100 virtual race, which is, I'm not particularly keen on virtual races myself, but I think that is something where you can pick one or two of those, because that still puts some money into those companies. Like you say, Sinead, that if those companies don't have any income, ultimately the companies are going to fold. And so the virtual races is definitely one way of doing that. So I kind of chose very carefully which one am I going to try. And in the case of the Lakeland 100, they actually donate the vast majority of the money they get in to charities in the Lake District. So that was my deciding factor on that one, was that actually it wasn't so much about supporting the race director's company. It was actually the charities that race supports were losing out heavily by the race not being on. And so I did that virtual race for that reason. That was when I did my own little jaunt into the Peak District. Yeah. So we did the full mileage in one go.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, there was this wonderful lady turned up on Snake Pass in a camper van at 4 o'clock in the morning to let me get out of the storm for 10 minutes.
The rain was awful. I don't know how you got back out and went, like, it was just, yeah, unbelievable. But very good effort. So what's next for you both? Like, what's the future holding training wise, and what's the next race that you're focusing on?
Yes, I wasn't sure before the race or during what I might do after. But I think obviously I've had a lot of confidence from the good placing on that race. I want to carry that forward, build into next year, and just be optimistic that we'll get some good races next year. I've really started enjoying, since the summer, kind of hill running. So I want to get into a lot more hill running and just enjoying that. So see where that takes me.
Well, you're in the perfect place to do it.
Yeah.
So is that sort of your main focus? Because obviously the CCC is quite a technical race as well. Is there anything you're going to be focusing on in terms of how you prepare for that race?
Yeah, so I guess that's what kind of started me doing more elevation, more hill running, is knowing that, speaking to people, that's a big step up, the CCC, and knowing how mountainous it is. Mm-hmm. So I think that'll be the focus of the training.
Have you done any of the route yet?
No, never been out. I was hoping to, because I was booked to go out, and I was hoping to still go out for a holiday.
Yeah.
And then about 2 weeks before, they brought in the restrictions for France. So I had to cancel that holiday and move that to next year. So.
Yeah, I've spent the past 2 years being out there for five weeks ish each year, and I've done quite a lot of parts of it, and it is technical, but if I can do it and not cry, so it's okay. It's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. You'll have a lovely time, and the atmosphere there is on race week is just phenomenal. So I wish you all the best with that.
No, sounds good. Thanks.
To get the points just to get into it alone is an achievement. So well done.
I know that took a couple of years, and I'd heard from people I know that have done it. It could take 3 years to get in. So and you get more points each year with the lottery. So I applied, thinking it'll take me 3 years, and I got in first time. And then obviously I thought very lucky. Then it was cancelled this year. So.
I had a race in Austria, and it was a CCC equivalent in the Grossglockner. And I must admit, when they cancelled it, there was a bit of relief that I had another year to train.
Yeah.
It's just the element of unknown, isn't it? That step up to the actual mountain race is a little bit scarier.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Yeah. Oh well, good luck with your training. What about yourself, Kev? What are you doing next?
Well, I've signed up for another little mountain race, the Dragon's Back.
Oh yeah.
So that's my big aim. So it's pretty much a full year away at the start of September 2021. So at the moment, though I'm hoping if all the stars align, that I'll be on the spine in January. Other than that, I have actually got a place in the summer spine and in the Lakeland 100 next summer, which my coach says I'm really not allowed to do both because they're too close together. And
they are very close.
me.
I was just about to say.
So yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, the overall journey is similar to Mark's in that I'm just now taking on a coach. I've been coaching myself up to this point, but with the dragons back being so scary, essentially, I'm interested to see how much more I can get out of myself since I've got such a good base in place. And I think I've learned a lot about myself, and I'm really interested to see how far I can push on from where I'm at. So yeah, the Dragon's back's the big focus.
It's interesting that you're both such different runners. In terms of Mark, yourself, you probably do races that are probably under a day. You're not suffering from the sleep deprivation, whereas Kev just seems to be want to spend a week running as much time as possible out in the hills. Mark, have you got any interest in sort of pushing yourself to that sort of level where sleep deprivation starts becoming into your training?
Yeah, it definitely interests me. I just wonder whether my feet would hold up for running a week. But no, maybe one for the future. Yeah, I think just now with young family and work, it'd be quite hard to find the time to do that and train for that.
Yeah, we've all started as a support group for Kev's wife, Val. Just hashtag support Val. She's definitely a superstar.
She must be.
So thank you very much for both taking the time to talk this morning. It's been really interesting to talk to you both, and thank you for letting me ask you some questions. Is there anything else you'd both like to say before we sign off?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me on. It was good.
No, I think I'd just finish off by saying, because we've primarily been talking about the Hardmoors 60, that it is, I believe it's a really good race for somebody that's just getting up to that distance, in that it's not particularly technical. It's really nice scenery. It's very well organized. It's also a great race for somebody that is at the front end because it's reasonably competitive. You know, the winner this year was 9 hours 40. That's pretty fast. Well, 60 odd miles going up and down all those steps. So I think it's a good race, and a lot of people can get things out of the race. So maybe that's a good thing to finish on, just bigging up the race.
And just what time of year will it be on next year, if all goes to plan?
Yeah, it's all usually on mid to back end of September. So that's the normal time that it's on. So, and if you join the Hardmoors Trail Races Facebook group, you get notice about when it's going to open for entries, because it does usually sell out. It doesn't usually sell out very quickly, but it does seem that the races that are on at the moment are selling out faster than usual. So it'd be worth joining that group and getting notice when it's going on, opening for entry.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you once again, guys. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you again, Mark, and thanks, Sinead.
Okay, thanks.